Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in to episode 18. This is going to be a solo joint this time. A little coughy, a little sniffly lately, so I hope you'll bear with me. Just a little bit of housekeeping, I guess, up top. So obviously, I've been off for a couple of weeks. Hopefully, you guys got to check out the episode with Rebecca McQueen. I'm still really excited about that episode. It was really cool to get to hang with her and talk about some stuff that we both feel like is really important, and that hopefully you guys learned a little bit, or at least you have a resource to go to, or a couple of resources if you have any questions or you're more curious about that. If you haven't checked it out, it's episode 17. It's released in the last week of December or so. Please definitely check that out. I took some time off to sort of finish up school for the semester, and some of you guys know if you follow me on Facebook, or if you talk to me in person or whatever. I graduated on the 14th of December with a master's degree in composition. So this episode is mainly based around that. It's about graduate school and sort of my experience, about how my degree went and how everything worked out for me, and some stuff, of course, that didn't work out, as I'm sure anybody who's ever done anything ever will be able to tell you. But I put up on my Facebook page just kind of a question, like what are some things that people maybe are curious about who have not gone to graduate school, or people that are considering going to graduate school. Or I even got a couple of responses that were really neat from people who had gone to graduate school. So I have a list that I'm going to try to work through. This is it's a very dense topic, and a lot of it is kind of personal as far as what kind of experience you can have. So everything, of course, I don't know if there's really a typical graduate school experience. For a lot of stuff, for a bachelor's degree in whatever, but especially music, you can kind of know what to expect. The expectations are, of you as a student, are pretty, they're pretty tried and true. But as I'll get into a little bit later, obviously graduate school is a little bit different. So I'm gonna do that. My new podcast day is gonna be Sundays. So I've got a couple more sort of solo episodes that are lined up. So I want to be able to sort of release more frequently, more regularly, more consistently. And since school is over and I have a lot of those commitments out of the way, and I'm going to say this word, not knowing really what it means yet. I have free time now, sort of, a little bit, maybe. But I'll talk a little bit about that. It's one of my topics for sure. So I want to get back to that. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, you see that I've started posting pretty much every day so far. We're here 5 days into the new year, and I've 5 for 5. But I've got everything scheduled for all of January, so you can kind of see January, just because of this is the first month I'm really doing it, is kind of seeing what I've done. I also do have sort of a daily thing that I'm posting that is new every day. I have a composition journal where I kind of do small sketches, a couple of notes of a melody, or maybe a chord or two, or maybe a chord progression. So just kind of sharing literally the newest stuff that I'm working on, because it's usually late in the day that I'm able to post that. But check out my Instagram and Twitter if you're interested in that. I want to document kind of what the life of a composer looks like. Obviously, composition, being a composer, that's just one of the things that I am. But it is, I don't know. I always found it fascinating when I think about, what does a firefighter do in their free time? What does a restaurant manager? What does a bartender do? Because some people, the things they post are like really fascinating, and you wouldn't expect from somebody who, something on social media, somebody that isn't maybe in like the public spotlight all the time, because those people, they have a sort of cultivated public appearance, but people that do everyday things for their job, often, and I'd say most of them that I've seen, on Instagram when I'm scrolling through there, have really, really interesting things that they're doing. And it's not just I went out for coffee, or this is what I'm eating for lunch. It's other stuff that's a little bit more in depth and really cool. So do yourself a favor, check out everything on Instagram. I mean, it's a really, really cool medium. Everything that social media is, I know, noted, but it's really, really, really fascinating. And it'd be great to have, a couple more subscribers even from there, or if you're, a follow on Instagram. And that's the last thing I say is sort of the intro to this. All the social media stuff that happens, I'm putting more of a focus on sort of gaining a following. I have a couple of projects that will help immensely if I have larger numbers. I will do a post probably in the next couple of weeks about that. I'm still drawing up the plans for it. But there's a couple of things I want to do that will require some help. So follow me on Instagram, especially. That's where you're going to see a lot of it. You can like my page on Facebook, Ornith Music. Or if you want to see anything that I'm doing, it will more than likely make its way to my website, ornithmusic.com. And certainly feel free to shoot me an email. My email is john@ornithmusic.com. So I'll have like 15 devices, and all of them have email and all my social media stuff on there. So if you ever need to get a hold of me, if you have any questions or anything you want to hear on a podcast as I roll into more solo episodes, or if you have an idea for like an interview episode too, like I've always wondered what the rhythm guitarist in a rock band does. I know plenty of rhythm guitarists. I can kind of work and schedule someone to answer some of those questions. Those are the best. And it definitely helps, to know that people are listening. Every once in a while I'll get a cool comment like, "Hey, I heard your podcast episode, and we've never met, but I'm friends with such and such, who's friends with so and so, and they mentioned it." And I was like, that's super cool. Because, as of right now, I'm not a rich and famous celebrity. So even 1 degree of separation, that really means a lot. So, if you're out there listening and you think it's interesting, you think somebody else would be interested, please go ahead and share what I'm doing. And again, I will be continuing to work to put out a little bit more that shows what it's like to be a composer, just kind of to be a working musician in general. We get into that later a little bit more in depth in this episode. So, without further ado, I'm going to start with the things that kind of that came from the Facebook post. I always thought that there's really fascinating musical discussions on Facebook. So when I posted this status, I got some really cool questions, and from people that I hadn't really talked to much before. But here we go. So the main thing that people ask me about as far as graduate school goes is the time commitment. And, people always ask, is it worth it? Do you feel like it's worth it? Well, I graduated, 2 weeks ago. So that's a complicated question, but I'll kind of do my best to share what my perspective is. And another thing too, like it'll be mostly stuff from my personal experience and also experience that I've gained from talking to people that I was in class with or people going to school at another place, maybe. But for the purposes of this, I'll talk about kind of my experiences. The time commitment for me was I did sort of a full-time two-year degree plan. It ended up being 2.5 years. And right off the bat, it's different than is sort of spelled out, but I'll get into why it was a little bit later. Typically, at the school I went to, the graduate program is kind of set up to be something that you could do part-time if that's what you needed to do. For example, most of my classmates, and I think most of the music graduate students that I was ever had any contact with, were doing a conducting degree or some sort of education-based thing where they have set aside time to work with an ensemble, or they're working specifically on like a set of pedagogical ideas and sort of honing that part of their musical skill set. And so a couple of those folks were full-time band directors, full-time orchestra directors, or choir directors that either were taking a couple of years off, or there was a couple of folks that I was in school with that were working part-time, that were going to school part-time and working full-time still. Since I was considered a full-time student, which I think was like 6 hours a semester, which depending on again what you're doing, if you're working with an ensemble, you might be on campus 3 days a week, maybe even 4 or 5 days a week, depending on which ensemble and what other classes that you have. But typically what happens is for most of my sort of music core in the graduate sense, those classes were like 1 day a week at, from like 5 to 9 or 6 to 9 or something like that. They were in the evening. Probably, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but they were meant for people that are sort of teaching full time. Sam Houston's always been sort of a renowned education school, and so they figure if you're teaching full time and you still want to come and pursue graduate study, then you should be able to do that. So a lot of those classes are sort of configured that way. And it's a small enough program to where those classes kind of had the entire graduate department at the time in them. So, the research class that I took, I think there were 10 or 11 of us. And as far as I know, it was all but maybe 1 or 2 people that, had come into the school within the last 2 semesters. So I got to kind of know everybody in that. But that was, as far as the time commitment goes, 1 day a week and in the evenings. There is also, very similar to if you're considering a music degree, I think a lot of schools typically will have some sort of applied lesson. I know that as a composer, I did 4 semesters of composition lessons and gave a jury and prepared the same way that I did during my undergrad for those things. And again, depending on your track, I think most of the plans are 4 semesters, and you're probably going to be in lessons for 4 semesters, because it's not there's not, from my understanding of the education, maybe even the conducting, there's not like a student teaching portion. It's sort of, you kind of have to figure that out already, or that's not part of the plan. So depending on your schedule with your professor, that might be an additional day a week, or if you can work it out and you're lucky, you can get there, have your applied lesson and maybe your 1 night class on the same day. You might only have to travel once. But again, if you're in if you are teaching full time, is a popular one, then you may not be able to as easily schedule your applied lessons. So it just depends on what you're doing as far as that part goes. And there was another thing, and I touched on a little bit earlier. There's my degree plan, I believe, had 2 semesters of an ensemble credit. I mean, I would imagine I actually did, since I studied in college, my instrument was voice. I sang with a couple of different choirs at SAM. I sang 3 or 4 semesters, I guess 3 semesters in the men's choir and 1 semester in the chorale, which was the top mixed group at Sam Houston. I filled in for them for a semester, and did a concurrent semester with that and men's choir. And actually not my last semester, my penultimate semester, if you will. I was in 3 different choirs. I did the early music ensemble and men's choir and sort of chorale along there. And actually, at that time, it was actually my last semester. But I was also in an a cappella group, and I was singing a lot that semester. That's not what I would consider a typical arrangement. That was just because of the days that I was already having to take off from work. I had those days open, and I figured, well, if I'm going to be up here 3 days, I may as well be in those ensembles, because if I already can't work those days and be earning income, I want to get the most that I can out of this experience. So some of my semesters were 2 days a week. Some of them were 3 days a week, and those times when I was in earning my ensemble credits, I was pretty much up there like 3 entire days, at least from the afternoon until the evening with those classes. So there is that's sort of the specifics of my path through graduate school as far as time commitment goes. But most of the plans are set up for 2 years. And so when I went to get my initial advisement, I knew which classes I was going to take when right off the bat. So that may be different, but I feel like pretty much you'll know what credits that you need to earn. How you earn them might be up for debate. For example, when I was going for my ensemble credit, I was like, okay, does that mean I have to be in one of the sort of more established university ensembles? Because at that point, men's choir was still in a growth stage, and also the early music ensemble that I was in, I wasn't sure right off the bat if those would count. And of course they ended up counting, because they're wonderful ensembles run by the most wonderful people that I've had a chance to work with. So it's just I tried to ask, and they were like, well, if you're gonna maybe do it, if you're gonna do it in your first semester, let's send some emails now. If you're not gonna do an ensemble just yet, then you can kind of work on that. I would imagine that any sort of graduate degree in music will have some sort of ensemble component, whether that's going to be performing with an ensemble. I would imagine if you're doing a sort of performer certificate or a master's in performance or anything like that, you'll have at least 2 semesters and probably more. That seems reasonable for education or conducting. I'm not sure. I would say probably 2 is reasonable. So that's kind of what you could expect. Again, unless you have some sort of, if you're working full time, it would be hard for you to make it up for a 12 noon rehearsal if that's, the middle of your 5th period or whatever. So that's, and again, I was a composer. There's a lot of parts, and I'll get into that later, that of my degree plan that we ended up being kind of unsure of as we went, but I don't think that was necessarily typical. But as far as time commitment goes, it's not usually as much time in the day or during the week as an undergraduate schedule, or at least it wasn't at Sam Houston where I went. But again, if you are, I just went on on loans. I wasn't. There was no assistantship. There was no fellowship or anything like that. So if you're going, just kind of paying either out of pocket or with some sort of financial aid, it's 6 hours. It's a rigorous 6 hours a semester. So it's just time in the classroom. But the classwork you can expect, if you remember, when I was doing my undergrad, there were classes that had the little W designation. That was a writing enhanced class. Expect everything to be writing enhanced times 10. You're going to be reading and writing a lot. You're going to be sort of required to synthesize, and it's not like you can turn your paper in and hide in the corner because you feel like you might have only gotten a C. The classes that I took were all kind of a seminar, and there was between 5 and 10 people, and so you were expected to be able to talk at length about the subject that you researched or the articles that you're supposed to summarize. It's not a big enough class typically. Even at larger graduate schools, it's probably going to be something like, if you're in class from 6 to 8, you're probably up until 11:30 or 12, just reading, just familiarizing yourself with the material, because that expectation is there right off the bat. Some people kind of built those habits, even as early as high school, or maybe through some of their more difficult upperclassmen classes in their undergrad. I did not. I was not super prepared for that, but it was made evident right away that the expectation was pretty high, and that this is graduate school. If you want to call yourself a master of music, you need to know how to master a subject, at least on a basic level. So the time commitment in the classroom, 6 hours a semester, but the time commitment outside the classroom was quite a bit more. Hopefully if you're considering graduate school, you are interested enough in the types of subjects that you would be studying to where that won't be an issue. And that's what made it easier for me, is like I really wanted to know how these things, like all this research that's done, how do you know what to research? Where do you go to find these things? If you're going to write a paper to present at a convention or something like that, like how does that work? What's the process for that? You get it's a little bit more of a peek into academia, which I'll cover that a little bit later as well. The next thing that was on that Facebook post was the long-term payout, and there was the caveat in the question. Even though you just graduated, what do you think is going to be your long-term payout? So this one it's actually more straightforward. When I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't know, there's a lot of ways to answer that. But when you think about what the long-term payout is for any sort of graduate study, again, I did a master's. There's terminal degrees as well. There's other types of graduate study. But for a master's degree in composition, I ask this question a lot. What is the point of getting a master's in composition? Several people have told me, if you go for 2, you might as well go for 3. And I asked them, what does that mean? Obviously it's you further study a PhD or a DMA or something along those lines. And he said, well, composition is such, in many circles, is such that if you pursue graduate study, if you go for a master's, especially if you go for a PhD or DMA, you more than likely will be working in academia at some point. And, the path that I've kind of seen through this is, once you get a master's, that sort of qualifies you to work at a junior college or maybe a community college, or once you get some experience, or if you're particularly give a killer interview, maybe working as an adjunct for a university or a smaller college. And then if you do that, once you have the experience there, you maybe pursue a doctorate level kind of thing, with the hopes of maybe full professorship or at least tenure somewhere, or adjunct at a larger school or something along those lines. So as far as the long-term payout goes, it remains to be seen for my personal case. I know that a couple of people that I went to undergrad with have since gone on to finish a master's and are now teaching at the college level, which is super cool. I'm super happy for those folks. And since they started doing that, I was in school and I was like, okay, I can't focus on that yet because I need to focus on what I'm doing and finish my school. As far as that goes, I have, started looking for community college jobs, and I'm thinking, oh, cool. I have all of the requirements I have all of the requirements on the paper that says that I'm eligible to apply for this job. So that's really cool, because even, some applications say, well, you just need, 18 hours or something like that, 3 semesters of graduate study in the field, and you can apply for the job. But many of them now say master's degree required. So you have to finish and graduate and be done before you can really apply for that. So in that way, it has already sort of paid out in that I am eligible to apply for some of those jobs. I haven't yet heard back. I'm not really expecting to, and I'm probably not going to apply with too much fervor until, I would maybe think about starting next fall. There's a couple of really great schools that are just right around me that I'm gonna give a pretty serious look. So I may post about that, because that's another thing as far as the payout goes. Well, how do you know when it pays off? If I get a job, if I will talk more about like maybe the interview process or what I put on my portfolio or what goes on my resume. Because right now, just, I haven't taught college yet, so that you have to kind of get in somehow. Taught lots of other places, but as far as the payout goes for what I've personally done so far, I do feel like I have reached a point where it wouldn't be unreasonable for me to get a job somewhere because of my teaching experience, and now that I'm officially on paper done. So now, as far as anywhere else that would apply, a composition degree, a master's in composition, I don't know if it would apply outside of academia. I think any kind of master's degree would be a good thing to a potential employer, even maybe outside of the field of music. I know that there are some internships at super huge companies that maybe they have like a music division that would look favorably on any type of master's, but especially a master's in, their music division or whatever. But as far as that goes, the payout I think will come when I, as I'm finding my way to re-enter academia from the other side, no longer as a student. But more on that. That's a good one because I think that it can always sort of be expanded upon. And as more time passes and more things happen, I'll be able to say what I've gotten because of my new degree. Okay, the next thing on my list here is expectations versus experience. So this is another good one because it's a very personal thing, and some of my expectations might match yours, and the experiences that I had might be sort of telling for you. As far as the experience goes, I was actually expecting I was expecting about the class load that I had. So again, I knew the degree plan was 6 hours a semester, so it wasn't that much time physically on campus. But I was definitely expecting it to be much more difficult than undergraduate study was, and I knew that the smaller classes would make it again very evident if you weren't on top of your stuff. As far as how I actually experienced that, it was that way and more so. It was really intimidating at first because one thing that I didn't know what to expect was who was going to be in class with me. It was fine for at least one semester. I'm fairly certain that my middle school band director was in either a class with me or a class right next door at the same time. That blew me away. I knew band directors were in graduate school, but I wouldn't have figured that my band director would be at the same school that I was. That was really neat. But what I was kind of surprised by, especially at first when I was in more sort of the classroom portion of it, is there were extremely talented and intelligent people from all over the world that I wasn't aware of that much diversity in the school that I was at. And I'm sure that there were some people that I just maybe didn't happen to cross paths with during my undergrad. But in graduate study, I think it was just really cool to see that many different perspectives. I was sitting in class with people that were trained in Spain and Russia and all parts of South America. It was just the coolest thing. It was really nice to get to know those kinds of people and hear some of their experiences. And they were going through the same stuff that I was, so it was just really cool. I wasn't sure what to expect as far as who's in the classes. One thing that was really neat though, as far as who was in the class with me, it wasn't all. When I finished my bachelor's degree, it was 2014, so I was 24, 25 or so. And I was a little older than the people in my class, just a couple of years. I switched majors, and it was a whole thing. But the classes that I was in were people of all different ages. So there was some 22-year-olds who had just finished their bachelor's degree. There was some 30-year-olds like me, and then there was 55, 60-year-olds. It was just really neat. It was a chance to grow, I think, a lot more with every single class. Every class meeting that happened had an opportunity for sharing a perspective that I would never have gotten otherwise, or just talking to a new person. And as people kind of came and went, people auditing the class or people who had a restrictive schedule during some parts of the semester, it was cool to see kind of people in and out. I wasn't expecting that, but that was really great. As far as other expectations that I had, like as a composer, especially, I was hoping, I had a reasonable expectation that, as if I'm submitting something for a recital, that's something that needs to be performed and that will go in my portfolio, and that, this is sort of a professional situation, that the interest for that piece of music, perhaps, or just the availability of performers would have been different, I guess, at least than my undergrad. And what I found this was at Sam at least, is that it was still kind of a challenge most times to find performers. So it wasn't so much a There wasn't that much like additional clout, I guess, that I personally had as a composer. It was still a thing like, oh, that's for a student composition concert. Well, let me check my schedule and I'll get back to you. And which again, it may not be indicative of every school, but from the people I've talked to, it is kind of that way. Without like a sort of established new music ensemble that serves the composers. Composers of any level of study, I think, may have similar challenges in finding performers. I was always grateful for the people that were able to dedicate some time for it. It's just, I think I was expecting that it would be easier, but for that particular thing, but it wasn't really. Again, just at my school. As far as other expectations I had, interacting with undergraduate students, I was expecting that to be kind of exactly how it was. There's a couple of people that are going to show some real interest in what you're doing, and typically I found it was the older undergraduate students, maybe they're 25, 26, kind of like I was when I was finishing, who can relate to me on a more personal level. But if I'm singing in an ensemble and I'm 30 and the person standing next to me is 19, it's going to be a little bit of a barrier. Just if you take the school aspect out of it, if you take an 18-year-old and stand them next to a 30-year-old, they're going to have very different experiences, different views, different levels of sort of musical awareness, different levels of professional awareness for sure. That was kind of exactly what I was thinking it was going to be. And again, that was because at my school, there was not a separate ensemble for graduate students. Your ensemble credits had to be fulfilled in an ensemble that was going to be almost exclusively undergraduate students. Still fantastic, wonderful music making, just different kind of on the outside parts of things. So that's something, just in many ways, if you're considering graduate school, just to be aware that you're going to be probably a significantly different age than the people around you. Especially if you've been working a few years and you're maybe in your late 20s or early 30s, it's going to take some adjusting to get used to having people who may have even been your former students in an ensemble with you, kind of working on the same thing. That was really cool. There's a couple of my former students that are up there now finishing their college, and it would be like, I show up for class or show up for ensemble rehearsal, and they're like, "Hey, you taught me for a couple of years." I'm like, "Yep, I'm in school again." It was wild. It was definitely wild, but that's something to be aware of. Something you may not think about until you see one of your former students in class or in an ensemble. It's shocking. I think in a good way, because if your former students have thought about music enough to go pursue it in college, then I think that's a good thing for most of the kids. But that kind of gets me in. The next thing was talking about the mindset you have as an undergrad versus the mindset you have as a graduate student. I think it's important to note that during my undergrad especially, I was not... anybody that knows me knows that I would claim this. I'm not like an awesome student. I was always kind of more interested in the information than maybe completing the assignments or doing well on the test or finishing a project. So there was a couple of times, especially in my first couple of years of my undergrad, my mindset was just like, I'm in college. I'm supposed to, have fun and learn who I am and learn how to be an adult. And I didn't drink at all, so I wasn't going to parties, but I was just kind of figuring out, what is it that I like to learn? What are the kinds of things that I like to be around? And so it did change quite a bit when I changed my major to be a music major. I had to learn pretty quickly that there were some things that I couldn't really have that anymore. So, I mean, even through my undergrad, as you see your mindset change, when I really started the music portion of my undergrad, I had just kind of started learning how to learn and learning how to, complete assignments and more reasonably meet deadlines and be a little bit more detail oriented with the things that I considered what I love to do, which is music. So, but I was still a little squirrely towards the end of my undergrad. I was able to, kind of pull through and get it done, but I don't know. I didn't really have a good sort of student mindset at that point, which leads me into how I was in graduate school. Knowing what I did and having taught high school full-time for a couple of years and teaching private lessons and writing more sort of involved and longer pieces that had more of a intricate workings, I had sort of reoriented myself to be a lot more details oriented. And I thought, like, when I went in there, I was like, I'm not coming in as sort of a blank canvas anymore. I have some training, I have some experience. Yes, I am a student again, but I am entering this endeavor as a professional musician already. I make a significant portion of my income from playing and writing music. So that I knew that the expectation would be that I'm not there just kind of killing time. I'm really there to develop myself as a professional. And I never had that during my undergrad. I was always thinking, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I may finish my music degree and, go flip pancakes or something. That might be what I love to do. But coming back as a graduate student was a complete 180 for me. I was super focused. I still had a life to live, and I worked the entire time I was in school. I drove all over the country the entire time. But when I was an undergrad, if I'm out somewhere and I'm wearing like a Sam Houston ball cap, I didn't think about it, I'm not typically a super loud or rowdy guy, but, if I'm walking by and I miss a trash can or something, I was like, oh man, whatever. But, when I came back as a graduate student, I was really, really hyper aware of, I'm not just representing my school. If I'm pursuing a master's degree, I'm working closely with these professors, and anything I do, especially if it's like in a professional setting, has their name on it too. And so it was more important to me to just sort of be on at all times. Not even like in an exhausting or debilitating way. I was just more aware as a graduate student. When I put on my bio that I'm studying with my professors and their names on it, and that's on my website, and that's on resumes that I send to people, and that's on my CV that I send out when I enter composition contests. It just became a lot more important that I'm just sort of representing myself and these other professionals that I'm very close with and that I admire and look up to, it's more important even then that I represent them well. So there's a couple of other things, just as far as mindset goes. Most of it had to do with just age on the calendar. When you start an undergraduate degree, most people, not everyone, of course, most people are 18, 19 years old, and they might be good at something, but you don't really know much. That's obviously not true for every single person. I had lived quite a bit of life before I graduated high school, but just in that short time, it really is kind of a short time between when I finished my bachelor's degree and decided to go back for a master's. I had grown a lot, and just in general, that how I carried myself, how I spoke to other people, how I reacted to things that happened to me. I felt like that I maybe didn't have control over. The way I reacted to those things is very different. Just in general, as a 30-year-old, or I guess 29 when I entered, versus an 18-year-old. So I don't know. That's kind of a given, but I think it's definitely worth saying as far as how you think your mindset changes, because everything you do, whether you realize it or not, affects you as a student. Because just because you're a student doesn't mean you're not a person. So, if you're a super diligent student, you're probably just a diligent person. Some people are different. I would say that in general, I'm more detail oriented and diligent outside of being a student, which sounds weird, but I don't know. That's kind of another wormhole, but that's less about mindset between degrees than in just being a human. Next question I had was my studies were interesting in that I also completed my bachelor's degree at Sam Houston, and so I studied with the same professor for my undergraduate degree as I did my master's, and it was an interesting process. It's definitely fascinating to see. It was illuminating to me, especially as I'm considering a DMA or a PhD later. What does it look like? What does the daily life of a doctor in music hold? And I, in the last year or so of my bachelor's degree, I actually got to play some gigs with my professor. We started. He had me out, I think, to sub for a musical theater performance, and I ended up kind of picking up a couple more shows, and it was super cool. We'd be backstage playing Dr. Seuss for little kids, that was a unique experience. Even then I realized, I was like, whoa, this is really cool. I don't think a lot of people get to really do this kind of thing. And I wasn't, I didn't study percussion formally in college. I was studying as a singer, and I was playing drum set for these theater shows. So I got to know him pretty well, and then after I graduated, we played a couple more shows and we talked a little bit. I finally asked him, I was like, hey, I've been teaching some, and I don't think I want to continue teaching full time. I said, what were your thoughts? And he's like, well, if you're interested in a master's, I think it'd be good to have you. So he kind of invited, we talked about it and thought, is this the best thing to do? And I asked him, I asked a couple people, I was like, well, how likely or how rare is it for someone to do 2 degrees in the same place under the same professor? I think the consensus was it's not super common for that to be the case, just because a lot of times, you want to get a different perspective, or you want to be in a different physical location, or you just want to be in a different academic environment, learn from different people who have different traditions and that sort of thing. But I think ultimately there was a couple of factors that just I had to think about from a practical standpoint. I applied to some other schools. I got even a couple of interviews. And the thing I was talking about earlier, especially during my undergrad, my wasn't like the most diligent student. There was definitely some things that I could have done better, and that's kind of what I was told. Is like, this is a larger program. We've got, if we've got 100 people interviewing for 10 spots, and your GPA is, 0.05 lower than the next candidate, then they're going to get the spot and you're not. And so a big part of it is, I was accepted into the school, and I thought about it once I got accepted. I was like, well, should I not do graduate school, or maybe should I put off graduate school and try to make up some of that? And I thought about it, and there's not really a way to do that. And so, SAM is relatively affordable as far as a master's degree goes. I knew the drive. I knew some of the people up there, but not everyone. And that was one of the things that kind of tipped my decision. Was a lot of the staff had kind of turned over. There was some killer new ensemble directors that I was kind of excited to work with, and super happy that I got to know, and very, very thankful to get to know them. So it wasn't just going back and doing the same stuff. It was very much a new set of experiences. And having been close with my professor, we were able to move past the sort of getting to know you semester, and I could bring something in and right away be like, this is not graduate level work. I know that you can do better. And so he held me to that standard right away. There was no, all he knew was what was in my CV and my portfolio. He literally coached me from day one. And so I think that we were able to achieve a higher standard because of that. Which I'm very thankful for everybody that I've studied under. But especially working with him for, golly, a total of 6 years. He got to know my work really well, and I got to know what he would expect really well. And I think that is valuable. And obviously, it shouldn't go without being said that I think very highly of his work and his teaching style and his just his approach and his professionalism. So I think that was overall a good thing. And I wasn't really sure what to expect about that, because the common thing is, I think the more common thing is to find another place to sort of thrive. But my circumstances took me back to SAM, and I'm glad that they did. So the next thing on the list was about the classes and the seminars and the readings, and like sort of the musical core, if you will, for graduate study. In general, several of them, and I think they were kind of designed this way. The classes you take first in your graduate study, I think, will probably feel very similar to how the similar courses during the undergraduate study would have felt. So, for example, if you have a history class, it's going to feel pretty similar in setup to that, but there will be much more scrutiny on the accuracy of your work and the number and types of sources that you're using to create a sort of historical picture about a given topic. So it's a little bit deeper dive into those things and just making sure that you know your stuff that much better for most of it. Some of it is even considered like a review class. So if you have a theory review, it's going to be similar to what you've done. You're just expected to do it at a higher level. Makes total sense. I would imagine that that's probably pretty common for graduate study, at least for those first couple of classes, to be, can you still write a 4-part, chord progression and use proper voice leading techniques and that sort of thing. And there's always this sort of, there's a little bit of I don't know, discrepancy is the right word, but there's a disconnect perhaps between different degree plans. So if you're doing a performance degree, how is the music theory class that you're going to take in graduate school going to serve you? Is it going to be different? Is it going to be the same? And I think it just depends very much on the instructor and the professor overseeing everything and, how well you understand theory. So if you're just sort of barely scraping by and you just, you're a gigging musician, any style, if you're just playing gigs and I know 1 2 4 5 1, it might be a little bit more challenging for you, and they might push you a little harder. Because again, if you've developed yourself as a professional and you have those sort of gaps to fill in, that may end up being a different experience for you than someone who maybe was teaching at the high school level and was working with that sort of stuff every single day. I think at the end of the day, no matter where you come from, there's a certain standard, just like your undergrad. There's a certain standard that you have to achieve, no matter what you want to do or what you've been doing. As far as like the theory stuff goes. Now for the history and some of the research-based classes and seminars that I was a part of, that was, the way we did it was a little bit more, customizable maybe. If there's a given topic, there would be a broad set of topics you could use. Like, choose something to research from 1780 to present day, something like that, and then like really get into it. And here's how we do these things, or pick something in time that uses your instrument. Tell us about the saxophone. Where did it come from, or how was it used in this century? Something that's guided, but a little bit more broad. As far as, what kind of topics you're going to study. So, if you're studying performance, and you may not know every composer of, if you're a saxophone performance major, you may not be able to tell every single opera composer that ever lived and what they wrote and where they're living when they wrote it. But you might be asked to be like, okay, let's, find someone who is a contemporary of John Coltrane and tell us about him. Tell us what he did. Where was he working? What bands was he in? What charts did he arrange? What did he write? Those sort of things. And if you're teaching, there was a couple of projects that had to do specifically with pedagogical approaches. There was things where it still was specialized, but you kind of got to choose your path a little bit. And it was really cool. It was actually really intimidating and daunting in some of those classes because it was, some people came into grad school and just knew exactly what they wanted to research, and they're very passionate about a specific thing. And when that, when that research project came up, I was like, oh yeah, right away, I know exactly what I'm going to do. It wasn't really that way for me at all. I was sort of ambivalent about, what we think of as research, and, filling in gaps that weren't there. I was sort of like, well, I didn't consider composition like a research-based topic. And one of the things I think that hopefully you would learn is that pretty much everything is research-based. If you want to be a great composer, you should be looking at what other composers are doing. What are performers doing? If you're a really great performer, I think it helps a lot to figure out where the music that you're playing came from. If you're an educator, who developed the method that you use to teach rhythm? Who wrote this music that was considered educational music? I think I ended up doing actually an episode of this podcast for a graduate class about marching band. It was super fascinating. It's actually a huge gap in academia, how drum corps relates to marching band, and that blew me away. And that was not something I was expecting. But the things that you're asked to kind of look at are much deeper dives, in my experience, and I would imagine probably across the board. You have to just go a lot more in depth, and it's not just, can you synthesize the information? Can you read an article and summarize it in your own words? It's, when you're done with this, could we publish this in a journal somewhere? Did you find out something or put two things together that were not previously put together? That was really fascinating. And I think that's how those classes kind of worked for me a little bit. So no matter what you're doing, you can definitely use those classes. That's the attitude that I tried to have, and that I recommend. If you can talk yourself into that, there's not really any sort of blow-off classes. It's graduate school. If they ask you to do it, it means a lot to do that. And there's a certain set of skills that, again, no matter if you're performance or education or conducting, there's a certain set of skills you should have if you want to someday call yourself a master of music. And even after you graduate, hopefully I'm not satisfied with the research that I've done. I'm going to continue working. Part of this is I want to kind of document what I'm finding out, and share that with people, and hopefully inspire people to find what makes them passionate about music, and help them on their journey if I can. So that's the classes and seminars and especially the readings were quite a bit more in depth, and from perhaps authors or compiled by editors that may not have heard much from during undergrad, because you have to cover kind of a lot of information extremely quickly. So some stuff gets missed. Some of the graduate study was filling in those gaps. The next question I got was about goals, as far as what my goals were going into the degree and what my goals are now that I'm finished. So since this is personal, I actually had some pretty clear goals that I was interested in. I wanted to, of course, write more music. And the reason why I think that going back to school helps with that is, if you're currently enrolled in school, and anybody who's taken out student loans will know this, it's really nice to not have that looming over your head when you're trying to do any sort of creative activity. There are days that, after I graduated, started paying back those student loans, that it was really hard to focus, thinking, man, I'm never going to write enough music to be able to pay for this stuff, to just exist and be a human. And so, I mean, that sounds really strange, and that definitely shouldn't be the only reason you go back to school. But it is kind of nice if you have loans to sort of temporarily put that on hold. They a lot of times will just sort of literally put a hold on it if you're still in school. That makes sense. If you're earning your degree, it's going to be hard to use that degree that you don't have yet to pay for those loans. But wanting to write better music was definitely one of my goals. And being in that environment where every week I have a composition lesson, and I, in theory, will be around performers a lot more frequently than I would be was I not affiliated with a university. And so I definitely think that was a goal that was achieved. I know that my fundamentals, I feel like I improved quite a bit on my fundamentals as far as like orchestration, writing level appropriate music. A lot of things that I presented for juries were for varying levels of performer. So I was like, this is going to be, a little bit simpler, maybe for a younger performer, but I still want it to be meaningful but achievable. Or this one's going to be for, a master's degree in performance level saxophone and, master's or doctoral level piano, that's sort of things. And so I think, I achieved those goals of getting better at that for sure. As far as other goals, so like I wanted to make more sort of professional connections. That was a huge draw for me to go back to school. Was when I go to music conventions, TMEA. Or TBA or ACDA, any of those, and I can say, hey, I'm studying still. I'm working on this such and such thing. I see that you're studying there too. What are you working on? Or talking with a professor, I think, well, hey, what is your school like? Maybe I'll come to you for a DMA, or maybe I'll submit to your school's composition contest or something like that. I met all sorts of people, and even through some of my like Phi Mu Alpha connections, it's like, oh, you're doing grad school now, cool. I remember seeing you at this convention 5 years ago when you're snot-nosed little 23-year-old. But I made connections a lot quicker in grad school than I think I did during my undergrad, which is really neat. Not even just out, but if I'm just online, or if someone, happens across my website, I hope, and it ended up coming to pass several times where they say, oh, you're in graduate school, you're working on stuff, you're getting better, you're studying and that. And so, maybe you'll be a good person to talk to for this project that I'm working on, or maybe come play this gig so we can talk about, whatever such and such thing that I've got going on. So that the networking thing, again, was another thing that I think that was really important going in. And I hope and feel like I'm a lot better at doing the networking thing. As far as another goal I had, that again, this one is a little bit more sort of situational. I was really hoping to get more recordings and sort of build the audio portion of my portfolio. And I didn't really have a specific number or type or whatever of recordings, but I think just what ended up being most practical for the recitals that were given on campus, they were wonderful recordings, but I was hoping for, maybe a wind band reading or an orchestra reading or a choir, sort of a large ensemble thing. That didn't really happen. And it's just the practicality of it. It's tricky because, those ensembles all are doing their world-class type things. And, you know, that with the composition department being relatively small, there's not really a culture of that where a given composer will have a reading of really anything. So that was one goal that I had that I wasn't really sure how I was going to work it out, and it kind of ended up not really happening. But, you know, as far as goals, that was kind of the big things that I had thought of as far as what I was going to try to achieve in school. As far as what I was going to do after that, you know, what are my goals for postgraduate graduation activities? I wanted to, when I went in, I wanted to finish up and get to work at a community college or a junior college or adjunct at maybe a smaller university. That's still one of my goals. I definitely want to experience that. I want to share what I have with college students, adults, basically. I love helping young people. I love teaching young people. But I do still want to experience what it's like to work with an adult at sort of a complex and rigorous task. Writing music is challenging, no matter who you are or what you're doing. But adults, may have, by the time they're 18 or 19, developed something that they want to say, and I want to help them learn how to say it. And learn about being a professional musician. I want to share all of that stuff, and that's still one of my main goals for post graduation. I definitely went in my master's with a mindset of someday finding a terminal degree program. I've looked overseas to see if go to the UK, go to Australia, go to Germany or something to sort of to look at a doctoral program, and that is still one of my goals as well. That's something that I think I'll know a little bit better about how that's going to work, or indeed if it's going to work after I work some, maybe at a lower level college program, maybe a 2-year kind of thing. But that passion, that goal that I had in my mind is one of the things that brought me through to be able to finish the master's degree. It was hard, especially towards the end. I was pretty stressed. So if I didn't have that goal in mind, I don't know if I would have been able to actually finish it up. The next question was about the academic and social culture of school, and I get like how it differed from my bachelor's to a master's. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, anybody that's been alive over the last 10 years kind of knows how that stuff has gone. I will say that the academic culture at SAM has matured quite a bit. Just, the given student, I think, is more sort of more dedicated to it, and the culture is a little bit more sophisticated than I think it was. And it's not meant to sound like a knock on anybody. That's how it should be. I feel like any school should always be working to get better. And a lot of things that are in place are improving. And I think me leaving and coming back kind of offers me a unique perspective, because the people teaching the classes may not see the changes happening because they will feel a lot more gradual. But I left for 2 or 3 years, and I come back and I was like, oh, okay, maybe instead of out of 20 students in a class, instead of 8 people turning something in on time and doing well on it. Maybe it's 15. That's a huge improvement, and it's kind of hard to see that unless you step away for a little bit. The social culture is I don't know. Sam Houston and Huntsville, the place where I went to school, was not. I wouldn't call it like super progressive, and I'm being extremely generous by simply labeling it not very progressive. But the Huntsville feels like a little part of the deep South there in East Texas for us. I remember distinctly several times driving down the street, like in town in Huntsville, vaguely near campus, and there'd just be a dude just walking, overalls, no shoes, shotgun, just walking down the street, not pointing it at anyone, just like he's carrying a fishing pole, just had a shotgun on him. That's interesting to me. That was an interesting part of of our culture, for that to be sort of commonplace. I do think, though, in the music school specifically, the student body, I didn't get to interact with much at large, but the music school, I think, has gotten a lot more progressive, a lot more accepting, a lot more understanding of everything. I know I definitely saw like a more diverse population, people from different ethnicities and different belief systems and different the LGBTQ community is, I felt very, very open, very accepting there, which I was really happy to see, because Huntsville, like I said, is not a particularly progressive part of the state even, and I'm so happy to see that I think has improved quite a bit from when I was doing my bachelor's there, and that to me is extremely important. Having an understanding and accepting culture is just so necessary for a productive environment, and to feel safe and wanted and accepted. Everyone should have that everywhere they go, but we don't, and so I think it is remarkable and worth noticing that Huntsville and Sam Houston have improved in that way. It's still a college town. There's still stuff that's in a college town, but I think in general, the social culture has become a lot more understanding and accepting. Great. So the next question: what surprised me during my graduate study? I think one thing I was expecting to have changed a little bit more than it did was something I touched on earlier about the way that composers and performers sort of match up and get together and create. There was a new music ensemble when I was an undergrad. I performed in it with a couple of different composers, but it was no longer offered, and that kind of surprised me, because I was thinking, well, if there's no new music ensemble, then what's the process to get things performed? That was kind of surprising, just in general. I don't know, not a lot really threw me for a loop. I think one of the things that another thing that kind of surprised me like a little bit was just the amount of time outside of class that I was actively thinking about or working on my studies. And that, again, that may just be sort of the culture shock that I had from being perhaps less involved outside of physical class than I should have been. But I think that surprised me, and it shouldn't. I will say this: it should not have surprised me how much more difficult graduate school was going to be, and how much more time it would take outside of the class. But it was something I had to adjust to quite a bit. But yeah, I think most things that people told me, I think, were pretty much right on, as far as what to expect and what to look out for. So the next thing, nature of collaboration. This was another thing that I was interested in how it was going to work, and because after I finished my bachelor's, I had a certain sort of process and a certain list of things that I wanted to happen in a certain order if I was going to be collaborating with someone. And I did the podcast about, designing a marching band show and how that process works. A lot of those things were processes that I sort of really honed after my bachelor's. So I finished that and then felt like, okay, I'm finally free to get to work and kind of figure out how I want to do things. And since then, the way that I collaborate with people, I think, is a lot more. I think it's a lot more focused. I know now. I've instead of collaborating with people that are older than me or maybe my age, I'm doing a lot of work with people that are younger and less experienced than me, and so I'm more able to sort of proactively take charge in things that I wouldn't have before. And now that I've finished and I can say that I have achieved this thing, it's no longer, it's still, I feel, equal contribution, but I'm able to sort of lead and guide the process of collaboration more than I was before I finished. Some of it is, I think, probably I just have done it more and I have more experience just collaborating and working with people. But some of it is I know how to more readily find answers. I know, the history and the theory things. I use those every single time I collaborate with people. If I'm in a band, even a rock band, and I was like, what should I play here? What's this lick? And I was like, well, I kind of remember from this one classical piece I studied that we use this sort of chord progression or this non-chord tone or whatever. It could be a lot of different things, but I have a lot more just practical, usable knowledge to draw from. And so that allows me to, I think, can just contribute more proactively in the collaborative process. So I always relish the opportunity to collaborate in pretty much any way that I can. I love bringing people in and working with them and making something great. But yeah, just being able to lead things a little bit more, I think, is one of the changes since my first degree. Next question was, do I feel like the way I'm perceived by my colleagues has changed since I've graduated? I mean, here's the thing about it. It's so very personal, perception, and how people perceive you, and then how you perceive people perceiving you. That hopefully is always evolving as you learn more about people and you meet more people and you do more things that are commented on and recognized. I don't think that anybody thinks much different of me having having completed this, and past this podcast, I probably won't talk about it like a whole lot. I'll probably be more project based, like I'm working on this show and I'm going to have this thing and it's going to be with this person, and I'm not going to be like John Patty, master of music. It's not necessarily like there's anything wrong with that. A master's degree is an accomplishment, something that should be recognized, but it's never going to find its way to my email signature. If I hand someone my resume, that's going to be on there. If they have my CV, great. It's hopefully not something that, I don't know. The people that know me and the people that have a perception of me, I feel like it didn't change much in that. And what I hope that means is that people just kind of respect me for my actual like musical achievements, something that they can see, or they've played a show with me and they think, oh, that guy's a good musician. It would never have occurred to them how many degrees I have or what they're in, or if I'm writing music, I wouldn't want any sort of degree or anything like that to supersede the music that I'm creating. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell, and again, it's so recent. I graduated and we haven't even like gone back to school yet. So I haven't, revisited. I'm planning to do a couple of small projects up at SAM next semester, but the next semester hasn't started yet. So that's another thing. I will definitely. I'm always curious about that. The nature of human interaction is really fascinating to me, and now that I have achieved this, I'm curious. I'm definitely curious if people will perceive me different or act outright different, or what I always think is fun is when I'm teaching private lessons and I have someone between 5 years old and 9 years old, and I tell them, I was going back to college, and they're like, "What's college?" I'm like, it's school. You're in this third grade or second grade, and they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, I'm in like the 24th grade. It's just more school." I'm like, "Okay." It's just, kids will ground you pretty quick because they don't know, and they probably wouldn't care if I told them I had a master's degree, and I love that. I think that's so great. My students do not perceive me as any different than I was before I finished, and it's very humbling, and it's a very really nice feeling. They only care, how good of a teacher you are. So but that's something I want to keep an eye on, and see if anything changes. Here's the thing too, like, I finished school, but I still send people pictures of John Oliver saying dope, or pictures of dogs that look like meatballs or whatever. Like, me as a person haven't changed that much, which I hope to hold on to. I hope to never let my pretense get the best of me, as far as that goes. So the next question is, what useful habits did I pick up in graduate school that I can use later? I've always been a pretty organized person, or I've at least tried to be, but I got into the habit of taking super, super detailed notes on literally everything. So I have, if you guys have ever seen me, or like even see any of my Instagram posts, I have pretty much every Apple device that's ever been invented, some version of it, and that makes it really easy to take notes on stuff. Some of them, voice notes. I can even take voice notes on my watch, or the Notes app on my phone, or an app I use on my iPad called GoodNotes. super, super useful, and it's really, really nice to be able to take notes on everything. I got into the habit of recording rehearsals, just documenting everything. Just everything that I save, I know I will have an opportunity to go back and use as inspiration or reference for something that I know I will need going forward. I don't plan on leaving the music industry anytime soon. So, if I think about it, it's like, oh man, that choir rehearsal from my first semester as a grad student, the teacher said something really, really cool. And go back and listen to it, and or I go back and look at my music that I sang that semester, and then I may have written a quote down on. So that it helps so much, and getting past the point where it like hurts to physically write. I still write on Notepad with a pencil, just normal paper sometimes. Or I write on my iPad, quite a bit with the Apple Pencil. But I wanted to make a point to write consistently during that. So if I need to write something down, I don't have to think about, oh man, that's really long, my hands are going to hurt. I just do it. I just write, and it helps a lot. Even if it's not a coherent thing, it's just I scribble, like tenors like to sing A flats sharp or something like that, just something super quick like that. I'll go back and look at old scores and or scores that I presented for a jury that were during graduate study, and I look at little notes that I took that maybe weren't even an official comment, or a criticism or something, a critique on the piece. I'll just write down buy this book, something like that. That's a habit that I've gotten into that, has yielded many Post-it notes all over my things. But that's a really good one. Another thing is scheduling. Again, I lean on technology a lot for this, but I have made it a point to, if I get a date on something, I immediately put it in my phone's calendar. I won't just try to remember or write it down and put it in later. I will tell, I use the voice recognition on my phone and create this event for this time that has this title. Between the calendars app and the little reminders app, I give myself sort of a running to-do list. And that has helped me so much, because the things that I do are in so many different directions that it would be extremely difficult to do those things if I didn't have the system that I have to organize all of them. So with those things, it really helps to develop some sort of to-do list / calendar for all of your stuff. Hopefully as you build your network, as you grow your skill, and you have, you're getting gigs, you're getting commissions, you're getting collaboration offers. If you fall down on any of those things, it doesn't matter why, you just won't get that opportunity again. So it's really important for everything to be in a certain place. And I definitely tried to work myself into that habit during graduate school. There's other habits that I kind of tried. They didn't really stick with me as much that I wished kind of they would have, but I cooked for a while, and I actually sort of fell out of the habit of consistent exercise, just because it was just so much. I'd finish a day of school and then go home and work on studying or a project, and then it's like, oh man, it's 10:30 and my brain is just mush. So there were some habits, unfortunately, that didn't survive grad school, but now that I'm done, I hope to kind of get back to some of that stuff. But yeah, so take notes and keep a good calendar and to-do list. Those are two things that I would pass on to anybody interested. Cool. Next question was, which was easier to work with, the consistency and frequency of an undergraduate schedule, or the flexibility and sparseness of a graduate school class schedule? I don't know. There's pros and cons to each. The thing about the way that I kind of did things is that no matter what I do, I'm pretty much always doing something. So when I was an undergrad, I was working the whole time. If I wasn't in class, if I had class 3 days a week, I was still working 5 days a week. I might have one day off. When I was in graduate school, I was at class 2 days a week, but I might have been working 6 days a week. So I think in general, what I did find easier and better to work with was the graduate school schedule. And I think that's mostly because even though I might have been in class 2 or 3 days a week, if they're all different classes, it's, I could reasonably do something one day before class happened, where during my undergrad, if I had an assignment in a Monday class, it was due Wednesday. I only had 2 days. And so it was a little bit more strict. And there were some things like, if I'm working or if I have, a big project coming up, it's nice to have that sort of flexibility, to have a couple of more days on a fairly consistent basis to work on something. Or during a seminar kind of class, if it's like, hey, I got a gig, and it's going to pay a lot of money, there's nothing due, professors might say to you like, well, Skype in after, or, if you miss one, just try and have a conversation with someone about that. That certainly wasn't always the case, and I did my best to not accept any gigs that would take me out of class. But I think some part of that is, being a working professional, not having any sort of assistantship or commitment past just being in the class. I think that affords a little bit of leeway sometimes, not always. It's certainly not a rule, but I think in general, the sort of the flexibility of being on campus fewer days a week was more advantageous. And also, just if you think about it, if you're in graduate school, you're older than you were. You're hopefully better at managing time than you were when you were in your undergrad. Even though the structure of the bachelor's degree is nice because you don't have to think about things as much, so it's less work to have a consistent schedule. But if you're in graduate school, if you're really dedicated to it, you hopefully have developed some sort of time management skills before you went in there, and you certainly will by the time you've left. I don't know. I think I personally enjoyed, just from a enjoyment standpoint, I like the flexibility of graduate school more than the consistency of bachelor's. Common pitfalls. What kind of warnings? What are some things that I noticed people falling into pitfalls? So there was, I think that the most common pitfall that I saw in fellow graduate students was people being overwhelmed and still coming back the next semester. A lot of the classes you take, if you're doing music, you kind of have to take them in order, or your 4-year degree will turn into a 6-year degree, especially some of the upper level theory classes. If you're at a smaller school, classes, if they don't make, there's not 10 people in them, they may not be offered for another 2 years. So if you miss that class, you might not be able to graduate for a while, and you might not be able to start your career. But with graduate school, there was not very many classes that I remember that were offered on like a 4-year rotating basis or anything like that. So there's people that I talked with that were just not having a good time, and for anyone really, if you need to take a semester off, that's an option. But I think in graduate school, just you can. Like more so, it won't like ruin your schooling career. It won't put you out. And if you're not jiving with the whole like full year schedule, I would say just, really consider could you just take a semester off, recover, maybe pick up a hobby or something in that semester off, and find a way to sort of reorient yourself and then come back the next year. Just because the graduate burnout is very real. Even the most dedicated and diligent people can get overwhelmed. And there's no shame in that. It's not meant to be something that you can just casually do. And not everybody is cut out for a master's degree, and not everyone is able to do it in the exact pristine perfect amount of time that the degree plan says. That's the same for really everybody, but I guess especially if you're not working on a cyclical class that you have to catch, just take some time off, and sort of more further to that point, I found myself doing this a couple of times where I was learning as a professional musician that not every project, not every gig, not every whatever that comes up, you don't have to accept or say yes to any of those, especially not all of them. And if you're in graduate school and you're used to saying yes to every single gig all the time, consider taking one of those, those things and say like, hey, I got to study, or hey, I got to work on this project, or hey, I just need a day off. That became huge for me because I was very much in the, okay, you got a theater show? Yeah, I'm going to play. Okay, you got a cover band? Yeah. Okay, you want me to go on tour with your country? Yeah, and then, in my first or second semester, I'd just get home and be like, oh man, I have 2 classes and both of them have like a thesis level project that I haven't been able to start because I was on tour. Like, that's just being aware of the sort of gravity of what you're working on in your graduate study is huge. So yeah, take some time off, maybe decline some gigs. Obviously, if you're gigging to support yourself, you probably can't do that. But if there's any possible way to do that, if you're in 4 bands and 3 choirs and you're writing for 6 different groups, maybe drop something, Another just pitfalls in general, I think, with graduate school do with overexertion, never taking a day off, never resting or relaxing. I don't know. I didn't know anybody that, like partied too much in grad school or whatever, because I think by that time most of the people have either gotten that out of their system or already like just don't have time for that. But overexertion is kind of like the partying thing was in your undergraduate days. Just try not to push yourself past the point where you can actually be successful. There's no shame in taking a day off. And that's, if that's hard for you, I understand. That's hard for me too. But no matter where you go to school, no matter what you're doing, it's okay to take a day off, because you should be able to prioritize school, so just those are good things, I think, to be aware of. So the next question, networking during school, consistently, even when you're constantly busy, or maybe you don't have money to travel or don't have money to go out every night. This is something that's I've kind of looked at in the last, I would say probably calendar year. 2019, I think, was a big year for me as far as networking goes. Just you kind of have to be on the lookout at all times, because I would say that I'm a busy person, and I'm making ends meet financially, but I wouldn't say that I have a lot of extra discretionary funds. So I'm always aware of these things, and if I'm going to a convention, I have to save up for 4 years before I can afford to pay the hotel and the registration and to be not working for a week or whatever. But there's things that make networking really easy, or not necessarily make it easy, but definitely make it easier. So that there's things like social media. And if you're going to be a working professional musician, and I know that I can speak from my experience as a composer, it's kind of hard to explain what you do, but it becomes easier if you have a way to broadcast what you're working on to anybody that will listen. So, for example, if I have a percussion ensemble that I'm working on that I eventually would want some percussionists to play, if I post about it, if it's on my Facebook page or my Instagram or my Twitter or YouTube channel or whatever, that helps me create those sort of connections without me having to physically be somewhere else or having to maybe call a specific person. If I just post somewhere, that's a way that I can continue networking, even if I'm working on 10 different things. And again, I think a big thing is just if you're constantly showing up in someone's feed, there's no way that anyone could deny that you're working. They see that you're, this person is obviously a working composer because I can physically see what they're composing. I think same thing, if you're a performer, post some videos of yourself playing. And then, because I know that I look at those and I'm thinking, oh, cool, maybe I can book this person to do such and such. Or I know who to call if I'm looking for a trumpet player or whatever. And, with things on social media like that, you can be passed down through 3 or 4 people. And it doesn't really matter how or what it was that got there. But if you're there and you have a presence, you can be networking, and you might get a text message at 3 a.m. You wake up the next morning, it's like, hey, I heard from a friend who heard from a colleague who heard from their boss that you did such and such, and I was wondering if you were available for this. And all you did was post something, maybe a week ago, and there it is. Social media is a huge part of my networking thing. The school that I work with right now, over in Virginia, golly, it was 10 or 11 years ago, and that literally started from me joining a Facebook group and waiting and kind of, not having any hits right off the bat, but a month in, I have someone who I consider extremely close and beloved work colleague that I write music with. As a matter of fact, his name's Marcus Grant. You should check out his website, and he's a working composer over in Virginia. He's brilliant. He's a fantastic trumpet player. And he's just kind of started a YouTube thing. So I'll probably link him in the post here. But Marcus is wonderful, and you should check out what he does and give him lots of money to write music. Another thing too is with networking it doesn't have to go so far as necessarily to develop a brand. I kind of I have gone that direction because I am going to do a lot of what I do online, and I chose to go that route. But if you're, if let's say that you're going to grad school, you're going to finish a master's degree, you should have a business card. It definitely would not hurt to have a website. It should look like, a master's degree is a professional endeavor. It's not always like the way that a bachelor's degree works out. Because some people get a bachelor's degree and work in a completely different industry. And that's fine. Whatever makes ends meet, whatever makes you happy and satisfies you as a person, if you feel like you're, contributing to society. Just do what you need to do. But I, in my opinion, if you're going for a master's degree, if you're even starting graduate school, design yourself a business card or get somebody who does that for their work to design you a business card. It is so much worth it to have that. It doesn't need to be anything like super fancy or super expensive or pretentious or anything like that. Just have it. Just have a business card that looks really nice. It's a good look, in my opinion. Cool. So another question is working during school. This is kind of depends on your situation. I think I said earlier, I was not privy to any sort of assistantship or fellowship or anything like that. So I was kind of I wasn't really I wasn't able to pay out of pocket either, because I wasn't able to save up quite that much. But I was kind of working to make ends meet. So I had a retail job at a large retail establishment. I so appreciated my time there. Retail, I was doing sales. Retail sales is definitely not my forte. Thankfully, it was not a commission-based thing, so I wasn't having to. It wasn't like a super stressful thing. It was really a great environment to work in. And I think a lot of people have to work as in the service industry and work on for 6 cents an hour or something. I'm very thankful that I didn't have to do that. I had to work though. And I think for a lot of people, they just kind of have to work, because even if you're not paying for school, you have to pay your rent and your car note and your insurance and all of these other things. So another thing, but like I was saying earlier, as far as pitfalls go, if you do have to work during grad school, you have to find a good work-life balance. And if you're able to share those things with whoever you're working with, your employer or whatever, or your coworkers, be like, hey, I'm in grad school. Find an environment where you could reasonably take a day off or something. Just, I know that it's so hard, but even if maybe you make $1 an hour less or something, but you have a positive work environment, it's so important, because the time that you're not in class, you still kind of have to be in school mode. You kind of have to be thinking of, there's that project and there's that. And if when you're at work, you leave and you're just upset and you hate life and you can't even imagine how you're going to be able to go on. You won't be able to rest and get to school or even get to work or whatever. It's so important. Find a place that that you can survive. really, is what it is. Because again, I know I had to work. I didn't have a choice. But definitely take a look at that. Let me see here. I just want to double check the post and see. So the last thing I'll say, I'm going to just very briefly revisit sort of the time commitment and the payout. And people ask me, they were asking me last semester because they thought I had finished a semester ago. Is it worth it? Was it worth it to go to grad school? And half of the answer is, I won't know that for a while. And it's hard to say. It really is hard to say whether it's worth it, because let's say I get a high-paying music job that's not teaching at college. Can I reasonably say that was because of that I got a master's degree? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Unless the person that hires me or the job I get specifically says, yeah, we saw that you finished a master's degree. In that case, yeah, I'll know for sure, absolutely, 100%. But will it have been worth it from a financial standpoint? I don't know. I'm a composer, so short of teaching college, I don't know that. I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. Was it worth it? My thinking, yeah, it was worth it. And the reason I say that is because after I finished my bachelor's, I was in this place where, okay, I did the thing that so many people do. I got a college degree. I'm working. I gig sometimes. I kind of floated around. I was teaching, and I loved teaching, and I made a little bit of money doing that. But for me, I was like, if I'm really going to say that this is me, I'm a professional musician. Music is going to be my life, no matter what. I need to do something that is at least one step up from this. And so I was thinking, you know what? A master's degree is one step up. Not, a lot of people get bachelor's degree and get one job, and then that's the job they work for the rest of their life, and they're fine, and they feel happy and satisfied with that. But when I finished my degree, I did not feel that way. I was happy to be done. I was happy to have that achievement. And again, I don't know if it's going to yield a bunch of financial success for me. Because if I'm teaching, private lessons, maybe not. If I was going to go back to teach full time at a high school level or something like that, I don't know that a composition degree would yield any extra money for that. But for me, it was a thing that no one could ever look at me as a person and say that, that music was just a hobby, or music was something that I just used to kill time before I did my real work. Music is absolutely 100% what I have dedicated my life to. And it's hard. I mean, it's kind of a hard living, again, because where the money comes from is not always clear. But it was not as much for what I was going to get out of it as much as it was I completed something that satisfied something in me. So I don't know, because people ask, well, I love teaching, I love music, and I'm working as I'm a band director, I'm a choir director, I'm teaching high school or middle school. say, well, is it worth it? Am I going to see am I going to see a pay raise? And, to me, my answer to that question, because I asked myself the same question, it was, am I satisfied with what I'm doing and, teaching? Is that my like main calling, teaching at a public school? And I think if that's the case, then the money kind of doesn't matter. Like if you're being paid enough to pay your rent, put food on the table, I think that's kind of a calling, and it wasn't really for me. I don't think a master's degree is going to get you like more money, but I think that whether it's going to be worth the time just depends on kind of where you are in life. If you want to do more, if you want to teach college, if you want to contribute to academia and research and, more so than like the everyday life of a teenager or maybe even an elementary school kiddo. If you need to have more music in your life than teaching and education, then I would say maybe consider a graduate degree. But if you're teaching, at a public school or a private school or charter school or whatever, and you wake up every day and feel like this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, man, you may not need a master's degree for that fulfillment. Unless you talk to your boss and be like, hey, how about a $10,000 a year raise or something? But I don't think it's usually that. I don't think it's usually that much at all, if anything. So, it just kind of depends on what you feel like you want to do, as far as whether a master's degree is really, really worth it, and how it'll help you do that. For me, I know it's going to be something I'm going to look at when I'm working on my 4th marching show of the week, and I've also got a chamber piece or something that I'm working on that is particularly challenging, and it's due the next morning. I'm going to look at that and be like, man, I did it. I did that. I finished that, so I can finish this. It's something that is going to keep me going on those long nights, or those days or those months where I may not have a gig and I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from. I'll just remember, it's like, man, I finished that. I can get through this. So that was a big part of it for me. Whether it's worth it for you, I don't know. And if you're listening to this, thank you so much. Golly, it's been, what is it? Yeah, it's been right at 2 hours. Holy moly. If you've listened to me talk about graduate school for 2 hours and you've made it this far, thank you for listening to me. And I hope that if you're considering doing it, that some of my thoughts or opinions or experiences have helped you. Like I really do. Because it was hard, and one of the things that helped me get through it were the other people that were going through it, or the other people that have gone through it. So this is something I'm putting this out there for anybody who thinks they might want help or might want information. I would be super, super pleased if if you're listening to this and you think someone would enjoy it, share it. Send them the link. While you're at it, if you look at any other episodes that you think they would enjoy, I would love to have more podcast listeners, because as I post more stuff and as I have more input, I can sort of put that back into the podcast and then get more information that y'all want to hear. Or if you want to be on the podcast and you wouldn't mind having your name up on the website. I love that. I love talking with musicians and talking about music, and it's obviously the most important thing for me. So it means a lot that you've listened to this far, and it is officially midnight. So I am. It's no longer my birthday, so I can talk about that. But yeah, thank you for listening to me talk. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly towards the last half, because it's been a long day, as all of them are. But thank you so much. And be on the lookout for the other stuff that I am working on. It will hopefully include you. Thanks again, and y'all be good.